Everything you believe about who you are is a lie you've been telling yourself just to survive. And the version of you that you're so proud of, it's not even real. What if the version of you that you spend your entire life defending, your reputation, your achievements, the personality you've carefully constructed, is actually the only thing standing between you and true freedom? Most of us move through life assuming we are the ones in the driver's seat, but as Carl Jung discovered in the final quiet years of his life, we are often just playing a role in a script we didn't write. Jung spent decades documenting a transformation that usually only happens at the very edge of death, but he realized something truly unsettling. This process isn't reserved for the dying. It is already quietly unfolding within you. If you ignore it, you risk spending your entire existence guarding an identity that was never actually real, a fragile shell built out of habit, fear, and the desperate need to fit in. Jung's most profound insights were not gathered from people at the peak of their success, but from those who had reached the absolute end of the road. For over 30 years, he worked with terminal patients, mapping the landscape of the human psyche as the body began to fail. He noticed a pattern so consistent and so precise that it forced him to abandon his previous assumptions about human identity. As the future vanished and the ego could no longer hold onto its illusions of control, something extraordinary happened. The frantic need for achievement, the obsession with what others thought, and the constant draining tension of maintaining a self began to dissolve. In that space, a deeper presence emerged, what Jung called the self. This self wasn't the identity defined by a job title, a social status, or family expectations. It was something far older, something that didn't feel like it was being built, but rather remembered. Jung was shocked to find that, regardless of cultural background or personal belief, these patients reported almost identical experiences as they approached the end. Their dreams underwent a radical shift, their fear of the inevitable evaporated, and they described a sensation of returning to something deeply, anciently familiar. It was as if their psyche possessed an internal knowledge that the conscious mind had spent a lifetime fighting against. They realized that death wasn't an end, but a transition back to a state of being that existed long before the ego was even formed. Jung identified a recurring four-stage sequence in their dreams that signaled this transition. First came the imagery of movement, long winding roads, vast rivers, bridges, and shifting landscapes. This was the psyche preparing for a change of state. The second stage introduced archetypal figures, wise elders, animal guides, or watchful ancient presences. These figures didn't threaten, they accompanied. They were symbols from the collective human heritage, proving that the ego was no longer the one in control. The third stage was filled with light. Patients reported dreams of radiant cities and luminous fields, experiences that felt more vibrant and real than anything they had ever encountered while awake. Finally, in the fourth stage, the individual ego completely dissolved. The dreams were no longer about me or my life, but about wholeness, circles, spirals, and mandalas. It was the total surrender of the separate self into pure, unified awareness. But then Jung uncovered the truth that kept him up at night. He began seeing these exact same symbols and stages in people who were perfectly healthy and nowhere near death. People who practiced deep self-reflection, meditation, or what he called active imagination were touching the exact same territory as the dying. That was the moment he realized the truth. This process isn't about dying, it's about waking up. The self doesn't wait for your final breath to reveal itself. It has been calling out to you your entire life, through the dreams you ignore, the synchronicities you dismiss, and the strange, quiet moments where your normal reality feels like a flimsy costume. We tend to live on the surface, defending an ego that acts like a bodyguard, for a boss who doesn't exist. The ego is a useful tool for navigating society, but when it becomes the master, it turns life into a constant, anxious performance. In his final years, Jung made a statement that was widely misunderstood. He said, "I do not believe in God." He wasn't rejecting the sacred. He was rejecting the idea that meaning is something you find outside of yourself, in some distant place. He realized that what we call the divine is actually the deepest layer of our own consciousness. It is something to be realized within, not worshipped from afar. Jung's final uncomfortable insight was this: you are not a body that happens to possess consciousness. You are consciousness, currently experiencing the temporary limitation of a body. If you want to touch this reality, you have to stop looking outward for validation. The process of individuation, becoming your true self, begins with one brutal question. Who are you when no one is watching? Not who you were trained to be, not who your parents wanted, not who your coworkers expect, but who are you beneath every mask you've been forced to wear? Most people are terrified of this question because it forces you to walk through the shadow, the parts of yourself you buried to gain acceptance, the emotions you labeled unacceptable, and the truths that felt too dangerous to speak. But Jung discovered that the shadow is not the enemy. It is the gatekeeper. Wholeness doesn't come from being good and suppressing the dark. It comes from integrating the full range of your humanity without judgment. You know the self is calling when you feel a growing, nagging disconnection from the life you've built, when you crave solitude not to hide, but to hear yourself think, or when your long-held beliefs start to collapse under their own weight. When you feel that pull, you have two choices. You can ignore it and continue living in a state of quiet inner division, or you can answer it. You can turn inward, face the parts of yourself you've avoided, and finally meet the part of you that has been waiting under the mask all along. Jung's message wasn't about waiting for the end of life to make sense of things. It was about waking up while you still have the chance. Stop living on the surface. Stop defending a temporary identity that only exists to survive. You aren't losing anything by letting go of your ego. You are returning to what you have always been, eternal, whole, and free. The self has been waiting for you, patiently, your entire life. The only question left is whether you will be brave enough to meet it before the curtain falls. If this message resonated with something deep within you, if it felt more like remembering an old truth than learning something new, then you are already listening to the self. That quiet, steady knowing you feel right now is not your imagination. It is awareness, beginning to remember its own nature. If you want to continue this journey, if you are ready to explore the unconscious, the hidden power of the shadow, and the truths that humanity is often afraid to face, then subscribe to A Patient Mind. This channel is not here to offer you simple motivation. It is here to facilitate a deeper awakening. If this video stirred something in you, hit the like button. It helps this message reach those who are searching for these exact answers. And if you know someone who feels lost, disconnected, or trapped in a life that doesn't fit, share this with them. Sometimes a single idea arrives at exactly the moment it is needed most. The self does not shout, it waits. And now that you have heard its call, the choice is yours.